Bienvenidos a un capítulo más de Diálogos Sensoriales. En esta ocasión, me toca entrevistar a una persona que es muy importante en el área, ya lo van a conocer. Ella es Soumi Paul Mukhopadhyay. Espero haberlo pronunciado bien. I hope I pronounced correctly. Y bueno, pues vamos a platicar con Soumi. Soumi, thank you so much for accepting this interview and welcome to Diálogos Sensoriales.
Thank you for having me, Ivan. It's my privilege, honestly, to be here.
Well, we recently met at the Punkboard conference in person, but I have seen your name in many places, so it's an honor for me.
Oh, thank
Okay,
you. Hopefully, all good.
of course, yes. Okay, let's start with our primal question, which is why and how did you start into the sensory field? When was that first time that showed me realized that want to work in sensory?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it all started, I think, when I was doing my bachelor's. So it was long, long before, in the
Okay,
year 2000, 2004, when I was doing my bachelor's in agriculture. So, as part of our study, we had to grow rice by ourselves. So you can imagine we did
right,
everything and then we harvested the rice. And then we didn't know after, but because I'm from India, rice is our staple. But I always had the question about what happens when we harvest our produce, and then how that goes to the consumer in which kind of form. Luckily, it was easier for me to travel that path because I did my master's in food technology, where sensory science is one of the subject in one third semester. And then I realized that whatever we do, whatever our farmers do, whatever our producers do, and then how it goes to all the food manufacturing process, it has to taste good, it has to smell good, it has to be kind of accepted and then preferred by our consumers to make sure that we have repeat purchase. And then that means that's where the brand strategy, that's where everything starts. But it all starts with testing different product, looking at products from a scientific perspective, and where I actually fell in love with sensory. At that time, I didn't have any idea, Ivan. It was long, long time ago that I will be in the sensory field, but that is one of the subject that really kind of intrigued me about. It's an interesting one where people are involved, where our emotions, our happiness, our kind of preference for different things are involved. And doesn't matter if it's our best friend, we probably don't always like the same thing.
right.
And why we don't like it, then we can argue about it. So it's all started. And then I think in so many different small areas, like, your question made me think, like, I started my career in Nestle immediately after I finished my master's. But I started as a quality assurance coordinator. I think that was the kind of a start. But where in the part of the quality, sensory was one of the kind of areas that where the product characteristic, product acceptance was kind of measured every day.
Mhm.
And that's where sensory was part of it. Then I moved job, and then somehow sensory was part of it in the ingredient choosing. So it was kind of, everywhere it was kind of woven. And then by the time I realized that I wanted to pursue my PhD and do some higher degree research, it was almost by the time I already had 10 years of industry experience in different fields. And slowly, I think at the time, Ifan, you can say that in 2012, when I got my PhD offer from Charles Sturt University in Australia, and then the journey started from India to Australia, and then where I did my PhD, and the whole idea about sensory science, understanding the fundamentals, foundation, all started.
Right. So it means like, well, there are several questions that I have in mind, but first, it was not love at first sight with sensory, but it's more like I'm curious about that, right? And who inspired you to that field? I mean, if there is any group of people or a particular person, is who inspired you into that field?
I think when I was studying my master's, obviously I read the book by Hildegard Heyman. I started knowing the name about Rosemary Pangborn.
Mhm.
Obviously, I never met them in person at that time when I was doing my master's. But those are the people, those are the kind of influential person who actually made me fall in. I will not say I didn't fall in love at first sight. It was just the curiosity, but then it was that intrigue that actually get me more towards that particular subject. But it is more about the human-centric experience, It is more about when we are talking together, like you and I, on a round table, then we are discussing about product characteristic, but then we are going into our separate ways in different booths and then trying different things. And sometimes it is at the first thing that come to your mind. In sensory, you have to trust your gut. You have to trust your senses. You can't just think about, oh, is it sweet? Is it salty? Like, especially when you're doing the basic threshold test, I'm thinking about, oh gosh, it is normal water, or there is a little bit of salt or sweet I'm testing. Or the color, I'm sure you have done several times, Ivan, when you actually look at the different color grading, and everything looks like all different shades of green, all different shades of blue. And those kind of things, it's so interesting because you just have to then make sure that you are thinking at the way you are supposed to, and you are looking at the product for its own characteristic. You are also trusting your gut, and then you are going your next step. But there are several people, I think, when I did my master's, it was some of my teachers and professors, because I did from Central Food Technological Research Institute, Mysore, India. It's called CFTRI. It is one of the premier food institute in Southeast Asia. There's only like 26 students at that time when I was doing my master's, from 26 different states. So you can imagine like one student per state. And it was a very premier kind of a course, because that particular course in the master's, it was actually teaching us how to be industry ready, how to actually merge the traditional understanding from research and academics to make sure our knowledge we can apply in the industry going forward. And the campus placement is one of the biggest drawback. That's where I got my job in Nestle, my first job. And there, I think all the love for sensory consumer science started actually solidifying, if I look back, because it was always there, at first few years of your career, when I was not sure what path I'm taking. Am I going to be in quality or research or sensory or what else, or product development? Sensory is, I think, is part of everything. If you're being part of product developer, if you're doing quality, if you're thinking about research, if you're thinking about how to improve a variety, everything you do, now I understand that sensory consumer research is part of every facet.
And how different is your perspective as long as you start knowing more sensory? I mean, as the time of as a undergraduate student, or now after a PhD, how different is your perception of the sensory field?
Oh, it is definitely different. I must say a funny story. Okay, so one of my career highlight was to be appointed as the first food scientist Asia Pacific for Whirlpool Corporation. So Whirlpool is a company for who are producing all the refrigerators, different other kitchenettes and everything. So I was recruited as their first food scientist. It was in Pune, in India. And when I came for the first day, because the whole company was full of like mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, so many, all engineers. It was a very highly, like one of my highlight. Everyone thought I'm probably going to be work in the canteen, looking after the food that they're going to serve, not like doing actually the food research.
Right.
So for them, they couldn't understand how a master's degree, having a food science and having some industry experience, what value I could actually add. But then they realized, and on the next couple of years, which is amazing, I had a lot of like amazing time in developing and launching the first 3-door refrigerator in India, where the sensory research was part of, understanding how we can keep the vegetables fresh for a longer time. So did some kind of a research, did some actually sensory testing, like understanding if it is fresh. So sensory was just initially to check different part of the kind of, from peripheral point of view when I was doing my undergrad. But now I realized, when I had this whole journey of like kind of almost 20 years now, gosh, I'm getting old. You feel like it is there at everything. From the time we get up in the morning, till the time we go back to bed, I think sensory science is always helping us. It is helping us to, when we open the fridge, if there is a bad smell, we probably know that there's something wrong in the fridge, the milk or the fish. When we are brushing our teeth, the kind of perfume we are choosing, the cloth, all the material that falls on our kind of skin, so the kinesthesis, everything is kind of so intricately linked with sensory.
Right.
So it is, I think I have a much more respect for the sensory consumer science. And with the advancement, you obviously know, Ivan, the way everything is growing, there's a lot of kind of development about electrical nose, electronic tongue, and all that. But still, the human experience, I think it is still at the center point of what we do.
Right, it's not only the test itself, it's like the sensory experience at all. I mean, of course,
Yes.
there are many fields that are centralized in one research, but at the end, this is the sensory experience, right?
It is definitely. So, it is still like whenever any brands are trying to introduce a new product, or they're doing competitive benchmarking, they're trying to, replace some of the ingredients for cost saving, or trying some new ingredient, trying some new product. They always have to do, and they always do some kind of sensory consumer research, even if not every company can afford, with the cost and everything, having a fully functional sensory team on site. But that's where all the market research agencies actually come into play, where you can think about, recruiting specific. So it doesn't matter if an Australian company, suppose, trying to develop a product for Mexico, but then I'm just taking a kind of a hypothetical situation, but to understand what actually would work with the Mexican consumers, with Mexican culture and context, there will be some kind of study has to be done. There will be some kind of acceptability, minimum. I'm saying at the minimum. So otherwise, there's a huge kind of risk of brand failure, not understanding what your consumers want, not having repeat purchase. And, so those kind of thing has a lot of implication on how the brand name or the brand loyalty comes into. So sensory, definitely. I think we can talk hours after hours, about the relevance of sensory.
Yes, that's the thing, because everybody has a different
Perspective.
history or perspective of sensory, but that's the thing. How difficult was for you to move from India to other places? Of course, I know that there's a job. Well, not everybody looks for a new job or whatever, but how easy was for you to move on into another place?
Wow, I think that's a very kind of emotional, and at that time it was kind of challenging. Like now I'm sitting in, Sydney in Australia. It feels like it is so easy to move around, and it is 2026. But think about, I finished my master's in 2006, and I had like almost 7 years of doing part of Nestle, part of Whirlpool. I went back to my alma mater for some research assistance work. But then I was always thinking about going for higher degree research. And I'm sure a lot of the students always think about doing higher degree research outside the country. My husband had played a big role. I think one of the biggest influencer and supporter from where I am today is definitely my husband. So I was looking for going to do PhD in outside India, along with the different organizations in India. And then this particular role came from Charles Sturt University in Wagga Wagga. And I must say, I never heard Wagga Wagga before I came into Australia. Okay, so sitting in India, I applied for this role, and then it took few times. At the time, there was only Skype. So I had a Skype interview, some of the telephone interview, and then the time comes when I got the confirmation that I have received a full scholarship, because it was very difficult, Ivan, to think about coming from Indian subcontinent in 2012, coming to Australia. If I would not have any scholarship, I would not have be here today, honestly. If that is the first thing. Then obviously the project that I worked with. So I worked with the understanding consumer preferences for Australian grown chickpeas in different cooking format. And that's where I think my route with India and having chickpeas in different formats since I was like a child definitely held a lot of kind of importance in understanding where the project is and where the project is going to go. Because ultimately Australian industry, they wanted to export a lot of chickpeas to India. So understanding where and how those chickpeas are going to be used with that cultural context, as I was saying to you, was definitely relevant. Another thing is when I actually came to Australia to do my PhD, my son was only 5.5 months old. So coming to a completely, like, I just don't know how I did it. And obviously that's probably one of the reasons I say that my husband played a biggest role as a supporter, as a as as an encourager for me to take the step. But it was so difficult to coming to a new country where it was very cold at the time, and having a 5.5 months old baby boy, and not knowing what I'm getting into. But I think it was the warmth, the acceptance, the warm welcome from Wagga Wagga. The community is amazing here, the regional community. And then my supervisors were also like really there for me and my husband and son to make sure that I was comfortable. I never thought that I would finish my PhD in 3 years' time. So by 2015, I finished. Had a lot of good breakthrough about what the Australian grown chickpeas can do in the Indian subcontinent. A lot of media release had really clear impact with the Australian farmers who grown chickpeas. So I think I felt like I made a kind of contribution to that knowledge creation and sharing that where the next step can be. And then it just fell into places. I never thought that we are going to stay back in Australia, because I got a really good higher degree research visa. We thought after, and I had my back job in Whirlpool, I was also told that I can always come back. They knew that I was going for PhD. But then it just, things fell into place. And now after finishing, I finished PhD in 2015, it's 2026, 10 years. I'm still here and really enjoying and building this community, as you said, like building communities about the next generation sensory scientist, helping some of the way that I got help. I got some of the really big encouragement from my seniors, from my friends, from my family. If I can do something for the next generation people who are coming as new international students or something, that would be a kind of a way for me to give back.
Nice. Yeah, but well, before Skype or the internet, let's say, it was kind of difficult to get in touch with the sensory community unless you have the phone number, the address,
yes,
maybe the fax number, or an
I
email.
never tried fax.
Okay, that's interesting. I remember. I will tell that in another time, but it's important that you're trying to build that community or help the other people. I mean, that's the thing of the sensory, I guess. No, the work in a group manner and collaborate with other colleagues, no matter if they are or not sensory people, right?
Yes, and you are correct. Like, I just don't know. I think in the last 5 or 6 years with the LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn definitely helped a lot. So obviously, I don't know about Facebook. I don't use Facebook for any like a work related purposes, but I don't have that much of internet presence when I was doing my PhD. It's just through emails and everything. It was very kind of rudimentary when I was doing my PhD. So I think I also came to know about how to, it is kind of a journey that how you know how to build your brand, how to make sure that you are building your reputation. Because as you said, I came to a completely new country. I was feeling like I don't know anyone, but then the kind of warm welcome, the way people embrace you, and I think that makes you part of that community. And it is a very it's a feeling that only someone who has gone through, they can understand. Not everyone will understand that, what I'm talking about. But if you're crossing continents to go to another country or another culture, and then you actually had a really good experience, you really want to build on that. You really want to build on that positive experience to give back something the way that you were, I was embraced. And I think in the last 6 years, I was very fortunate. when I was actually doing my last job with the department, the state government. It was kind of that always having that curiosity. I think that's another thing that I never let go. So always trying to learn something, always trying to know people and build that relationship, not to gain anything, because a lot of those relationships nowadays are very transactional. You like to build connection because you want to get more followers, especially in LinkedIn, or you want to get more likes. But having an authentic conversation with someone and building that relationship takes time and takes that trust. And once not everything goes always perfectly, but once you know and build that community, then you actually, can go and help someone, someone will come and listen to you. I have done a lot of sharing my experience because I think, as I said, my PhD, I never thought that I'll be able to finish in 3 years with a baby boy. By the time I finished my PhD, my son was like 4. But it was kind of that success of the hard work that I put forward. And then that reputation that I built, there was a lot of kind of areas where I was asked to share my experience. How like a woman from India having a really small baby, go to another country, and then obviously there are so many things happen behind the scene. It's not a smooth journey, but then finally the result came successful. So what are the things that didn't work, what worked well? So I think whenever I had opportunity, I always shared. And yeah, in the authentic way you can.
Yes, totally agree. Is there, I know you had not been in India for a long time, but is there a way that you can share some timeline of the sensory field in India in fact? Or I mean, I know there are many other people who work sensory, but do you know how it started there? If there is like a place to be if you are in sensory in India?
I think definitely. I think it all started. There's definitely my alma mater where I did my master's from, the master's in food science and technology, so CFTRI. It is one of the most premier institutes. So there is obviously one of the semester we always were taught about what is sensory science, where all the fundamentals about, how all the different testing, acceptatory testing, preference testing, all that fundamentals foundation were built. But then there are also various companies. I can talk about Nestle, I can talk about Unilever, I can talk about Mars, and I think sensory is always a big part in the Indian scenario, and it has to be, because think about the kind of diversity in India of different state, different even if the same, like suppose if I talk about chickpea, but when I did my PhD, I realized that the chickpea as a pulse, as used in different format based on which state you are in. So it can be used as dal, it can be used as a fried snack, it can be made as like the chickpea flour and then made different products. So because the diversity is so varied, you have to have kind of those sensory testing, consumer acceptability, preference testing going really strongly. Otherwise, you just don't know if it will be accepted in another state, or how the whole Indian context can be considered when you are launching a new product, or you are getting a product from another country and trying to launch it in Indian scenario. So I believe sensory was always very strong in India. There are sensory groups and the sensory kind of panels in most of the companies that I know. So many of my colleagues and friends from my master's degree, they are working in a different organization. And sensory is definitely a big part. So I know that there are a lot of different people who are working really great work in India from sensory. And I think in the last few years, Ivan, it's not just India, it's not just Australia. I think we are part of the whole global community. As you know that, I know that you are actually the chair of the next Pangbone that is coming in Mexico next year. So you can think about just the legacy of Rosemary Pangbone and having a full conference, starting on her name and honoring her legacy. There are so many regional conferences, regional groups who are actually doing different things to kind of collaborate and consolidate the different work and sharing the knowledge, because so many of the work cannot be shared because of confidentiality, because of commercial purposes. But some of the research, the fundamental research, is still like kind of transdisciplinary, global and international. So you have relevance from there.
Right. Well, as you know, Rosemary was uh, her family came from Mexico, New Mexico, in fact, and she was teaching in the U.S. and that first pangborn was in Europe. So that's the thing, she permeated the frontiers. So that's the interesting part of this Congress. As you mentioned, there are people of many places, and at the end, well, you're born in India, but now you are working in Australia, and you work also in the US. So it's like the good part of being a sensory people, right?
Yes, yes, and I must say that it's just like an honor. So my first Pangborn was in 2013 when I presented one of my posters from my PhD research in Brazil. So you can,
Right.
and my whole family, I went with my son and husband. We had a fabulous time because the whole food and culture is just so vibrant. And there I met. I should mention that one of my PhD external supervisor was Tom Carr. So
Hmm.
you probably know Tom,
Yes.
and where I actually met Tom in person in 2013. He introduced me to so many people. I met actually a lot of the sensory kind of stalwart there in Brazil. And then this year, last year, sorry, it is 2025, I went to Philadelphia for Pangborn, and then where I met you, but then others like Gail Civil, I met her there. She's like, you can think about you read their books and then you met them in person. And I was so conscious that, I'm just so here, and she's like a kind of, yeah, but just imagine the warmth. And that is true for everyone. The, all these people who we look up to, whose books we read, like, knowing from Hildegard Hemann, knowing from Professor Guinard, Rebecca Blabham, and then like they are just so down to it. They don't make you feel like, oh no, you are just a very early career, I'm here. But I think that's the beauty of being a sensory part of the sensory community. And it was just the most privilege for me was when I was nominated and then elected as the Global Outreach Chair for Society of Sensory Professionals, SSP, in 2024. So this year I'm finishing my kind of 2-year term. And I must mention, because it came as such a big surprise, Ivan, I have never been to US before 2024. I was always like, obviously, I was always present in LinkedIn. I was sharing things. I was very collaborative. But 2024, I first went to US when I realized and got to know that I was actually elected. And I thought, why they will elect me, who are not from US, who have like a very different kind of upbringing and coming from a different place, and then now living in Australia. But when I actually went to my first SSP conference in Pittsburgh, it is again like a big family. You feel like, there's only like a 200, 300 people there. Everyone knows everyone. It doesn't matter. If someone knows me, they introduce me to another person. And then it just kind of, the whole thing. And then last year when I went to Philadelphia, just after 1 year, and then I met so many of them again. And it didn't feel like I haven't had a chance to talk to them in person for 1 year.
Right.
It felt like we stopped, we just started. So that's the beauty. That's the beauty. And we're talking about the global collaboration. And I think that's where I feel so privileged to be part of this community and trying to do my own small way. I'm not very big person, but I think whatever the small way I can contribute and connect the dots and making sure that, the sensory science, the understanding why sensory is so interesting. You get to try, taste different food, different things. It's just where the importance is and where I feel so good to be part of this big community.
Right. Well, that's one thing they elected you as that correct person. Okay, Shumi. Let's move to this part of I call it the preference questions or 2EFC choice. It's up to you.
Okay.
You need to select just one of them. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
City or forest?
Forest.
Red wine or white wine?
Red.
Tetra testing or triangle test?
Triangle test.
Traditional descriptive analysis or rapid methods?
Oh, that's a traditional descriptive analysis.
Breakfast or dinner?
Dinner.
Tikka masala or masaka dosa?
Oh gosh, now this is not fair. Uh, both are pretty good. Tikka masala.
Tikka masala. Okay. Analytical or consumer testing?
Consumer testing.
Parametric or non-parametric testing? Sorry, statistics.
Parametric statistics. Parametric testing. I
Preference
feel more
mapping?
comfortable there.
Okay. Preference mapping or PLS?
Oh, preference mapping. That's my PhD was based on.
Well, share with us the link to the paper.
Context. Yeah.
Working at industry or doing sensory research?
Oh, I would love to be the bridge between those two. But I think the sensory research, because as of now it is a yes or no. So sensory research and
Fine, you block your impulse to describe the reason of your preference. That's nice. Thank you for your answers. Okay, let's move to the final part of the interview because time flies. So during this time, because I guess you had the opportunity to work with this let's say evolution of the sensory field. What new tools or techniques do you think were or are the revolutionary tools on this field?
I think that's definitely a great question. I think that nowadays the field is moving so rapidly. So there are some of the things, obviously artificial intelligence is coming in a very big way. And I still feel like, I know there's a lot of chat about, we will lose our job and everything, but I still feel with all the development that's happening in AI, in the field of AI and developing different tools, as I said previously, I strongly believe sensory consumer research is still having a lot of human-centric experience. So there'll be someone still, like I think probably some of the roles will be consolidated, but we are not going to go do everything via AI. So it will still be like asking actual people to do the testing and then probably doing the analysis in different way. So AI is something that I'll be definitely keeping my eye on to know where it is going. Second thing is the virtual reality, those immersive experience, virtual reality. I couldn't think that 10 years ago, there were lots going on, but now definitely I think it's a kind of an experience that if you have money and the resources, you can actually create those immersive labs, and then having consumers there to make sure that you have like a bar in the morning, like a bar testing in the morning. You don't have to go to the actual bar, but then you have like a beach testing in the evening or something like that. So you have those kind of context in a really important way for consumers to be there. So it was not about just you close your eyes and think you are in a beach. It's actually just you are in a beach, and then there's some smell coming. There's like a seagull kind of flying. And I must say that when I went to the Massey University last year for our NZOZ, like Australia New Zealand Sensory Science Symposium, Joanne Hort has a really amazing like an immersive lab in the Feast Laboratory. And so it was amazing, like, how you feel like you were part of that, even if that is, as a sensory, we knew it was not a real one. But when you have that experience, you actually forget that. You feel like you're part of that immersive experience. So those two definitely I'm looking at. There's a lot of work also going with food and sensory in space. So that's where I'm really interested in, because I do a little bit of outreach and STEM mentoring for high school students. And as part of that, I have been part of some of the space-related activity and challenges, helping students to think about outside their box. So these three areas that I'm definitely kind of keeping my eyes and ears open to see how the development's going. And probably in 2 to 3 years' time, Ivan, we can again talk and see what are the developments happen,
Yes.
how.
Okay, I was thinking it was that, but it is the opposite or something like that. Yeah, normally.
Yes.
And what is the most difficult, let's say, task or area in the sensory field, in your opinion, actually?
I think one of the difficult tasks is like, I feel like the sensory, some of the organizations have at least more than one sensory people. But I remember one of the workshop that I attended in Pittsburgh in the SSP conference is about small but mighty. So most of the organization nowadays have only very small team of sensory researchers, very few resources, very less money, but we obviously have to get the best results, isn't it? We have to still follow, even if it's a rapid method or traditional descriptive analysis, Ivan, you probably know, it's just the expectation is still there, but the resources and money and all the support is getting less and less with the budget constraint and everything. And then, and people feel like, I feel like we don't put enough importance on the sensory consumer research, that the value that it brings to the organization, the value that you bring by creating new knowledge, understanding all the fundamental work, like, all the work that Monell Chemical Senses Center does in Philly, all the foundation work, like, when COVID happens, all the anosmia, parosmia, and everything that happened with the smell and taste loss. If we don't invest in those kind of research, how we will know if the people have come forward, like, have they overcome what they were feeling? So I think those are the challenges. I think, Yvonne, it's about some people. I know that during my one of my interview days in India, some people still feel like sensory is like hocus pocus. It's like, there is no science. It is about, you like it, liking scale 5 or 7. But I still feel like those are the areas where we as a whole global team, global community need to work more harder, and making sure organizations understand that we need to spend a little bit of money more than we are spending to unravel those kind of findings. Yeah.
Right. I think sometimes it's like the lack of advertise or announcing the goals or the things that sensory is doing inside the company, because sensory always cost money. The vessel, the labels, the paper, the computers, the program, whatever. But they forgot to announce, okay, you invested whatever amount of money in me, but I save you with the optimization of the product, or now you can sell things with less sugar or whatever. So that's the thing. It's not showing off, let's say, of the accomplishment of sensory.
And I think that's you are so correct. And then I don't know if it is possible to highlight those because of the commercial in confidence part of it, but also.
But maybe inside the company, just within the different departments.
Yeah, and then I think the return on investment, ROI, has to be very clear. Like, when you are investing this amount of money, what you are getting out of it. And you talked about that. So it can be the ingredient replacement. It can be a new product in a different, whole different country. It kind of a mimicking the same product, but in a different country. So you don't have to go through the whole product development process.
Right.
You just have to understand another target consumer set, and just balance and, making sure that product that's so successful, suppose in Australia, if we want to launch something in India, we definitely have to understand both the countries' difference and, the similarities, so that both the product gets really accepted well. And there are people, who are doing this, who are constantly talking about why sensory is important. And you can imagine why that's the reason there are so many sensory conferences around the world. And obviously Pangborn is one of the major one, Eurosense is major, but not everyone can go to Pangborn and
Right.
Eurosense from all the different country. And that's the reason you have, Sense Latam, you have like Valencia happening, you have SSP, the Society of Sensory Professionals. We have a big one in India. So and that's the way we are collaborating, we are sharing the knowledge. It's a long way to go. It feels like, it's already 20 years since I finished my master's. It should have been, I think it is better than what it was there in 20 years ago, but there's so much we can still do in the coming years.
Okay, Soumi, let me finish with 3 questions, maybe 4, but at least 3. What advice would you give to young researchers who are interested into the sensory field?
I will say to them that keep your curiosity open and embrace it, because if I would have given this kind of same advice to my younger self 20 years back, I would have said that don't worry about it. You just choose sensory as your first and best way of going forward. Don't go in all the different fields. But I also say that it is important to try and taste different areas, but always trust your gut, because your heart will always say which one you are more comfortable with. And sensory is a wonderful field, sensory consumer science, because as I said, whatever we do, there is something that our senses are always related. So go ahead. There's so many exciting things are going to happen in the coming years. So be there to grab it.
And based on that, what will be, if there is any, the minimum skills that these people should have? Speaking about methodologies or background, or maybe personality aspects, which will be that toolkit, let's say?
Oh gosh, no, that's important, because I think personality-wise, you have to be very open to try different things. And I feel like I'm that kind of a person. I always felt more comfortable in the consumer research. That's the reason I chose, because I feel like I can put their hat and understand and really interact. Another thing is understand your basic statistics, having some good knowledge about fundamental science. We don't always have to be a psychologist to understand what consumers think, but having a kind of a good understanding in the school and college level, undergraduate level, about a little bit about food, a little bit about where the food is coming from, if you're doing sensory in food related area, because obviously there's a non-food that we hadn't talked about. So beyond food, there's like perfume, there is like so much, like you need to understand a little bit of chemistry. And I think sensory is kind of a bridge between everything. You understand basic science, statistics, you need to be like, have a little communication kind of a capacity. So you need to understand people, and you also need to communicate the understanding, because you will be working with general consumers, you will be working with researchers, you'll probably be working with government officials. So be in that kind of an open and inclusive personality, that's definitely. And then the knowledge about if someone is starting with quality, sensory is still part of it, most of the organizations. So understand what are the areas that they're working. If you're part of a product development, so all of these areas will definitely touch different points in the sensory consumer research. And I think having a basic understanding of science, statistics, that definitely will be the starting point, and then we'll go from there.
Nice. Thank you. Is there any sensory book, paper, poster besides yours that you will share with us, of course, but that you want to suggest to the people who is working with sensory or starting, in fact, with sensory?
Oh, definitely. I think for the newcomers or the started to working in sensory, I think you will start Googling Gail Civil, Tom Carr, Hildegard Heyman, Rosemary Pangborn, and then there is like so many current ones. So Rebecca Blabum. Then if you are thinking about it depends on the country, but I think there are some of the industry stalwart who did all the different work, and you just start, if you actually Google, like I did that before our interview, if you just Google 10 or 20 prominent sensory researchers, you get all the names. And it doesn't matter where are those people from. Are they from US or are they from Europe? It's more about what work they have done, what the legacy they are actually leaving. So I think that's where you should start. And a library would be good. I know that in LinkedIn, there are so many kind of, sensory communities. So UC Davis does a very good job in having their own community. I know if someone is listening from Mexico and Europe, I know this, you do such a big job, Ivan, do different courses, and just keeping our ears open, making sure that whomsoever is starting in the sensory world, they are connected with their regional organization. They go to one or two conferences, even if not the bigger one, but at least a regional one, to know people, to listen. Because I think initial years, you need to listen more and to understand. And then once you start connecting with people, don't be afraid to talk to people who you think, oh gosh, I should not, because they are so much higher. Because I have thought that, but I was always wrong. People always have so much to share, especially the people who have gone before our time. So
Nice. Finally, let's say you have a time machine and you can go either the future or the past. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, I would like to go to the past.
Okay. With that being said, let's say you have arrived next to the Soumi at the time she just realized she will work with sensory evaluation. What will you tell to her?
Oh, I would tell to her that don't wait for masters and having 6 years of industry experience. Give GRE and go to UC Davis and work with Rosemary Pangborn.
Okay, thank you.
I saw some of her teaching videos. Gosh, she was amazing, and so inspiring. And being a woman at that time, having and leaving this much of legacy that, after she has been gone for so many years, we are actually memorizing and really doing all these things, remembering her on her behalf. It's like a tremendous legacy. And I would love to be a fly on the wall if I could go back just to listen to what she was doing and all of that. So I think if I had that ability to go back, I would love to be in those kind of areas where all the people whose books I'm reading now, I'm being there with them and learning from them in person.
So nice. So yes, there are many videos that was like gathered together in order to have those in the possibility to attend. Yes, I had the opportunity to hear her classes in a cassette. Imagine.
Oh gosh, and you are lucky.
Yes, totally. But I would love to be able to know her. I mean, I know people who knows her. Yes, and it's amazing the way of thinking that she had permit the 2, 3, or even 4 generation of people doing sensory. So that's amazing.
Gosh, yeah, and that reminds me, and I just wanted to mention we did a whole 2021 Pangborn because of COVID, it all went online. I don't know what I have done, Ivan, and I think that's where the privilege is. Like I was kind of nominated and chosen as one of the interviewer. We did a 7-round Rosemary Pangborn remembering videos, and then I had that utmost privilege of interviewing like some of the biggest names, Howard Schultz, and all of the people and different time zones, and had that video, and I had some privileges, and that's where I actually reviewed some of her video cassette from the UC Davis library. And gosh, that was, I think, one of the biggest achievement, if you say. And I was also featured in one of the videos. Obviously, some other people took my interview but I must say, it was just an amazing time of remembering her, talking to people who knew her in person, and just listening. Like they still had that awe on their faces and the fondness, the way they were remembering her, and it's just amazing. So I think I would definitely would love to go back and be a fly on the wall.
Nice. Shomi, thank you for your time. It was a really nice talk, and I don't want to give you more time that the one I asked for you. But is there something else you want to add?
Um, I think I really like to say to people who are listening, if they're in like upcoming researchers or experienced, like sensory consumer science field is an emerging field.
Hmm.
It is very, very young in its kind of development. It's only like we are probably 70, 80 years old in that way, but we are a very tight-knit community. If you are listening, please get in touch with Ivan or get in touch with different people, follow in LinkedIn and be part of the community, be part of the conversation, learn from others, and try to contribute in whatever the way you can, so that the next generation would be kind of, remembering fondly about what are the things that we are leaving for them. So, and thank you so much for having me, Ivan. Like, it's
No,
a big privilege to be able to talk to you.
no, thanks for your time and
Thank
sharing your
you.
history, and hope to see you, of course, during the SSP this year, or maybe next year in Bangor, of course.
Definitely, I would love to. I'd love to see you there in for SSP. Definitely in Louisville, even I'm keeping you accountable, but
Yeah.
also definitely in Bangor next year. It would be
Sure.
wonderful to see you again in person.
Sure,
Thank
of
you.
course, we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much, and see you next time. A ustedes muchas gracias por vernos. Nos vemos en la siguiente ocasión de Diálogos Sensoriales. Si les gustó, denle like y compartan. Si no, simplemente no digan nada. Nos vemos. Bye bye.